Hello everyone, welcome. So on this part of the tutorial where we're working on our Telecaster guitar, we're actually going to be also providing an introduction to Blender. At today's date, we're working on Blender 4.0.2. It's the latest version as of February 2024. And, the functionality of it does change over time, but even if you're watching this in the distant future, most of the user interface and stuff that I'm going to be talking about will still exist and might just get a little bit faster and better with time. So in order to get Blender, it's very simple. It's a free program. You go to blender.org/download, and then you download it for PC or Mac. I would recommend donating something to Blender since they are free. I always like to do a little $5 donation with every time I download a new version, just to kind of keep it free and also contribute to the community. And if you donate, you get this little thank you. Very nice. Okay, so let's open up our downloaded software and kind of talk about the original setup here. So let me just pop this open. So we go through here. Please select, please wait while we install, yada, yada, yada. And it's migrating assets and features from my previous version of Blender, which was 3.6, I think was the last time I updated. So some of this stuff I'll show you will involve plugins and things that are also added to my new version of Blender automatically. Okay, so now that it's installed and we've opened it up, we're just going to click out of that initial window there, click on our cube and hit delete. This is the user interface. We're going to go over kind of all of the different parts of this in a minute here, but I want to start off by setting up the system. Okay, so Blender kind of picks up where Rhino leaves off. I think Rhino is better at modeling than Blender in a lot of ways, unless you're doing super organic modeling. I think that the sculpting tools and stuff in Blender are really amazing if you can, wrap your head around it. There's just so much depth to this program. I like the CAD functionality in Rhino for modeling better because it allows me to make sure that I'm being really, really accurate with my objects. I kind of equate Blender as more of a 3D sketchbook versus Rhino is more of like a 3D drafting program, right? So this is going to be a little bit more freeform, but it also picks up where Rhino leaves off quite a bit, I think. So yes, you can animate things. You can improve on the materials in a lot of ways. There are lighting factors that come into play in Blender that I think are superior to Rhino. There's a lot of things about this program that are superior, and personal preference, I don't like modeling in it very much. But I do know a lot of people who really enjoy modeling in this program a lot more, and that's fine. That's personal preference, but at least you get to kind of see how both of them operate and get a good feel for the user interface. So the way you navigate Blender is a little bit different. Yes, we zoom in and out with the mouse wheel like you did before. You click the center mouse wheel to orbit around instead of right-clicking and holding down Shift to pan, and then right-click brings up a menu, left, and then Shift and center mouse wheel kind of pan around the scene. Okay, so we'll talk about some more quick keys and stuff like that later on. We have our viewport here. We have our kind of world access where we can flip around to different planes here. And there are different modes as we're working in here. So there's object mode and edit mode. Object mode is basically controlling objects in the scene. And then when we want to edit a specific option, we can change into that. All of these up here: layout, model, sculpting, UV, texture paint, shading, animation, rendering, compositing, geometric nodes. All of these are basically all the functionalities that Blender has. So you'll learn how to use each one of these tabs to really create the most interesting objects, models, renderings, animations, that kind of stuff. By default in the viewport, it gives you a camera and it gives you a light. I usually just delete those. I delete everything out of this scene because I can always add them in later on, and it just makes things a little easier for me to control if I add them myself and control the parameters on them myself. So let's go ahead and go up to our settings here and preferences. And you want to make sure your system tab here has your graphics processor selected. If you have, have graphics capabilities, make sure it's selected here. Otherwise, you're not going to have as quick of a real-time ray tracing rendering as you would otherwise. So that's probably the most important thing. Make sure your system is set up with your graphics card here. And then every time you want to check to make sure you are using cycles, not Eevee. Eevee is great for like really basic animations, but it doesn't use the ray tracing. It's a better kind of rendering for quick things, where cycles is going to give you photorealism. And when we have cycles selected, you also need to make sure that GPU compute is selected if you have a graphics processor capable of computing your real-time rendering. Some computers, such as older Macs and stuff, you need to use, there won't even be an option here. But if there is, and you do have graphics processing capable of ray tracing, make sure you select GPU compute there. And sometimes, for some reason, when you open up a new file, it's not sticky, and you have to go back in here. Make sure it's on cycles, make sure GPU compute is on. Because if it's not on cycles when we do our rendering, it's not going to look anywhere near as good as even Rhino looks. But we can make it look even better than Rhino if we have cycles. All right. So samples and stuff, these are things we'll go over more when we get into rendering. By default, I probably do like 4,000 samples usually for my actual rendering, and 1024 max samples is fine for for when you're just looking at things in the viewport. That's fine. Next up, we're going to go to scene here, and we're going to go to units, and we're in the metric system. And right now it is set by degrees and meters. I usually switch this to millimeters. You know what? I'm just leaving it at meters right now. It should be fine. Whenever we bring in an FBX, it should bring in the units from our import from the other programs. So that is basically that. Over here on the top, this is what is in your scene. And right now we don't have anything in our scene. So these tabs over here, you've got your tools, what active tools you're using. We'll have options here. These are the render settings. These are your output, so like how big the file is going to be when you output your rendering. These are going to be things about your layers. You've got your scene. You'll have cameras. You'll have, like whether you're in the metric system, what kind of is there gravity? Is there no gravity? That kind of stuff. World, you can set like your background. If you have an HDRI and stuff, you can put a world on there. Yeah, so those are some of the functions over there. Along the top here, you've got your different visual styles, and I'll talk more about that when we bring something in. So next thing we want to do is we want to go back to Rhino and export our project, our guitar project, and bring it in here. All right, so here's our guitar. And remember the last that we renamed all of our parts here. So when I click on this, you can see it says pick guard and the layer is pick guard. Make sure all of your layers are organized. Make sure all of your objects are on the proper layers that you are going to be exporting. It's super crucial that you also have them renamed. Remember how we renamed it. We created this little button here, and you can type the word macro and copy and paste the Python script into the macro tool. So if I just type macro, macro editor, this pops up. Okay. And you can even dock it. I believe it's one of the toolbars you can add over here too. And then if we just simply go to my YouTube page, and I've got that macro copied into the Python code right here. I just copy it. Because if you have a Mac, you can't create a button on your toolbar, I believe. But if you have a PC, you can. So I just paste that into there, and you hit play, and it runs it. I usually keep a button up here. Cool. All right, so once that's all run and ready to go, left to right select, or right to left select, grab the whole thing. Make sure you don't have any duplicate objects. Sometimes I'll go to edit, select objects, and look for duplicate objects. Anything duplicate, I just hit delete and automatically get rid of it. Because it'll be problematic when you're playing with materials to have duplicate objects. Then we go to export selected. Now, this is actually a relatively crucial thing. So there are some settings here that if you mess up when you're exporting, you're going to have a nightmare the rest of your time working with this stuff. So I like to use Motion Builder FBX. There are different exports, right? There's an OBJ, there's STL. STL we use for 3D printing. OBJs are kind of like FBXs. However, they do not have as much data included on the materials as an FBX does. FBX will have things like metalness, glossiness, and other kind of parameters put onto the textures where an OBJ doesn't. So I always use Motion Builder FBXs. And then I'm going to title it Guitar. And I'm going to go save textures, and save. And then we can preview this. So I usually leave more polygons in the mesh. So you can see this is a preview, and you can see all of these polygons are so there's a lot of detail being triangulated into this object. You can lower it down a little bit, but what happens if you lower it down too much is some of the curves don't have enough data on them to be able to create the detail you need. And you can always tighten this up more in Blender. So I just say go for it, make it a little bit bigger. No downside at the moment. Unless your computer starts crashing on you a bunch, then lower down the polygon count. Or if you've got a really flat object, like you're doing architecture, you can have less of them because flat surfaces don't need as much detail to communicate, where curves need a lot of detail to make them look, rounded. So then I hit OK. Oh, it did not give me my options that I wanted. Okay, so let me just do this again. Guitar. And then I'm going to put it in my guitar folder here. Sorry about that for some reason. Okay, and then go to options here. If for some reason my options did not show up, but these options are super important. This is what I was talking about earlier. We want to export NURBS object as meshes, only export materials as Phong, okay. And then make sure export light and export views is deselected. That is super important, okay. Map Rhino Z to FBXY, leave that on there too. And vertex normal, so things are going the right direction. And then click always use these settings. And see, I had already done this, and that's why it didn't pop up and prompt the options. So go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm going to save it. Okay, so that saved it as an FBX file. I can now minimize, and we come back over to our Blender here. And I'm going to hit Shift A to add a mesh. Shift A, I'm going to add a cube. Okay, so if I click cube here, then I get this little dialog box down here, and it says size 2 meters. So 2 meters, of course, is about 6 feet. I want to do 38 inches. Okay, So it automatically, when I put the quote in there, just like it does in Rhino, it changes it to 0.965 meters. And the reason why I'm putting this cube in here is I'm going to bring in my FBX file, and just to make sure everything is going right with our units, we're going to use this box to compare the size of the guitar. So File, Import, FBX, and then we're going to go to my folder here. Include custom normals, blah, blah, blah. Subdivision data is good if you're importing sub-D files. That'll give you really, I'll put that on there. We'll see if that messes it up. It might not. But it's good to have if you have any sub-Ds you're bringing in. Because the sub-Ds will come in from Rhino and look exactly the same way in Blender, and you can then modify them even more in Blender or use them and sculpt on them and that kind of stuff. So import FBX. And it's looking good, right? Because you can tell it looks about the same size as my 38-inch box. Cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on the box and delete it. And I'm going to click on this and hit the decimal point on my numpad to zoom in on it. Okay. And you can't see any materials, but that's because we are not in that view. So let's talk about the different views here. So up here at the top right, we have our wireframe view, where you can see the mesh details. We have our solid view, which is what it was in. Then we have our rendered view, which will give you material look. Right? But not ray traced. And then the last view is ray traced, which will use lighting and stuff to give you the best possible visualization. And you can see the little fuzziness that happens when you rotate around in ray traced view. Okay, so FBX did a pretty good job of bringing in most things. Yes, we do need to change a couple of the materials, tighten them up a little bit. My UV map is brought in from Rhino exactly the way it was. The metals are a little bit different, but everything else is spot on perfect the way I want it to be, right? Okay, so next step is to clean this thing up a little bit, maybe add some lighting, add a little bit of scene to it, and then I want to actually show you how to render and create. Oh, look at this, a little bit funky there. Maybe I needed even more detail. Yeah, this one, let's see, shade smooth. Nah. All right, well, that I might have needed to bump up the detail a little bit on. And you can do that too. So like, oh no, that doesn't look the way I want it to. Everything else is looking good though. I'm going to hit delete on that. And then I'll just go back to Rhino and I will select this object and go to File, Export Selected here and export it as an FBX and call it pickguard. And then let's bump up the polygon count on it a little bit and preview it just to make sure it's still getting this little tip up here, right? It needs to go all the way up to the top there. There we go. And that's for sub-Ds. I don't even know why I'm messing with that. It doesn't change anything. Okay. Then we hit OK, and it exports it. And since I deleted it, all I have to do, and I didn't move the guitar around, I don't believe. I hope I didn't. Import FBX file, pickguard, import. Okay. So you can see why it's super important that we also made everything separate. And then over here on the right, we can also see all of our objects are nested into these into these, what they call empties, which basically means that this is like a subfolder. I don't know why they call it an empty, but it is. And then we can go to, like any of these parts are going to still be separate. So under hardware Chrome, you can see all of these are different meshes related to different things in the hardware that are Chrome. So in the empties, we've got a subset of meshes that are all related in the same tier here. This, of course, is going to be our frets, right? So we got fret. I don't know why it says fret 2, but whatever. Okay. So yeah, all the individual frets are here. And if I wanted to, I could also put them all on one layer, joined together, but then I got to create what we call a new UV map. So for example, if I select all of these frets, right, like that, we looked at the UV map when we were doing the body in Rhino. If we go to UV editing here with all of those selected, and then I hit my decimal point to highlight them all, you might have some overlaps on our UV map. See where they overlap here, right? But if I wanted all of the frets on one UV map, I can remake that. So if I hit Control J, let's watch it first. Where's the frets here? Control J. Click, where is it? Oh, I got to do it in option. Sorry. Object mode, Control J. Well, boom. Now watch when we look at frets here. There's just one mesh, right? But if I go to my edit view here, tab back over, my UV map is a mess. But I can go ahead and click on this UV and go Smart UV Project and set like a little bit of a margin. What that means is there will be space between all of the UVs for each one of these frets. So I'm going to go 0.01. Okay. And so now none of these are touching where they're separate UVs. So for example, now if I switch back to object mode, click out of it, click one of these. Oh, but they're all joined together. Sorry. So now all of these are joined together and the UV map is clean. Where we don't want to do that is on the body here. So the body, we've got this UV map that we brought in from Rhino, which is perfect. We'd already set it up. We made it beautiful. It's our custom UV map. Don't change this UV map, whatever you do. Okay, cool. So that's how you can kind of join together objects that you don't want to have as separate meshes onto one on one object here. Like if we're doing architecture, you might want to keep all your windows separate and they'll be all in these separate empties, which is lovely, right? So again, that's object mode and edit mode, right? When I click on the object, I'm in object mode, and then I can hit tab to switch to edit mode, and that allows me to edit things. Like I can even edit the geometry. I can grab parts of it and kind of move it around, whatever. So that's edit mode. Object mode, tab, edit mode, tab, back and forth. And then hitting A selects all of the parts of the object in object mode. Okay. And you can consolidate meshes onto a single object like we just did. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about rendering as well. I'm going to switch to modeling here and switch to ray traced here. And let's see what the differences are between rendering this in Rhino and rendering it in Blender here. So first thing I want to do though is I actually want to fix these materials. So when I select this object here, and I can go to my materials tab, right here, and this is the metal material, and I'm going to edit this material. So I've got a base color of black. I'm going to make the base color white. Okay, I've got a metallic at 0. I'm going to make that metallic 0.75. And then roughness is set to 0, which means it's already glossy. Cool. So that's the first metal, which is all the chrome hardware is on that one, right? And then the second metal is this one. So if I click on that one, I got metal 1. And this one again, I'm going to set it all the way up to white. Actually, no, I'm going to bring it down a little bit gray. I'm going to bump up the metallic all the way. And my roughness has copied over from Blender. So I'm going to leave that roughness like that. And then I've got this one, which is also metal 2. Click on this one, bring this to there. Metallic all the way up, roughness a little bit higher still. Okay, so that gives me my chromes, my metals, everything's back to the way it was. Awesome. Next is let's add some light. So if I go Shift A, I can go to light, and I'm going to do an area light. An area light is just a kind of rectangular light. If I hit G to grab it and Z to move it along the Z axis, that's how we move things in Blender. So if I hit R, and I can go maybe, what is it, the Y axis here? No, that's the X axis. X, I can kind of rotate it along the X axis. So R is a quick key for rotate. And then, so that's how you rotate. And then S, you can scale it up or down, just to change the scale of things. So those are kind of some of the most important quick keys. And then I can kind of change the direction here. Yeah, no, it's probably fine. So you can see how the lighting in Blender, I think, is really great. You can add a lot of detail through the lighting here. Okay, so those are the basics of lighting and kind of navigating the user interface. Let's set a scene here. So right now this thing is kind of existing in a void, right? And I want to actually create another object that we're going to put this in, like it's in a warehouse or something. So I'm going to go Shift A, and I'm going to bring in a mesh, and I'm going to bring in a mesh cube. And then I'm just going to scale this cube up, maybe along the Y-axis first, and then X-axis. Whoops. X-axis that way. X. All right, and then SZ. Make it a little taller. So just like a room with a light in it, the size of the room dictates how bright the light is going to be coming into the room. Okay, so if it's a giant room and you've got a flashlight, it's not going to light up that much. If it's a giant room and you've got floodlights, it will. So if I change the scale of the room, the light bounces more and gets around the space more. All right. So I'm going to switch now to a front kind of view here, put it in wireframe so I can see where my guitar is and where my kind of room is. And I'm going to hit G, Z to grab it and move it up. Okay. And then I'm going to zoom way in. G, Z. Because I want the guitar kind of sitting right there. Okay, click on a part of it, and I hit the decimal point on my numpad to highlight the object. You can also, if you don't have a numpad, a lot of you don't, you go to, if I don't have something selected, say I click on this, go to View, and then go Frame Selected. That's how you do it. So you'll have to do that extra step if you don't have a numpad, just to kind of, what's nice is it, of course, it's just like zoom selected in Rhino, where now I'm orbiting just around that one thing. So that's something that's used all the time in Blender. It's like I want to work on just, this. So you go numpad there, or View, Select Object, Frame Selected. Okay, so then I can just work on one area and space at a time. Great. So let's have a look at it in ray traced here. Okay, and you can see kind of how the light falls off, and it looks really kind of, I think, pretty special. What I want to do next, though, is I want to actually recreate that parquet floor. So I'm going to try to do an apples and apples rendering using Blender and using Rhino so that you can kind of see the difference. So I need to add a material to this. So I select my cube and I go to material here, and I don't have anything. So I'm going to hit new. And now I want to add a material from an image. So I'm going to click here and click here and go to image texture. It automatically turns it pink, and pink basically means you have an image texture, but it's not there. So if you ever open up your Blender project and you see a bunch of pink, that means you lost all of your materials. So I'm going to go ahead and open and go to my materials folder. Right, it's not there. Where we gotta go? Let's see. Users. Materials. Do I have my parquet floor in here? I do not, which is kind of a good thing because I can show you how to do that now. So I mentioned to you all earlier that OBJ files are a little bit simpler. If I wanted to steal a material from Rhino, how I always do it, I just do a box or something like that, and then I apply a material to it, and I export it as an OBJ file. So let's go ahead and go to materials and parquet and just put it on this box. Let's look at it and render and make sure it went. Okay. So this box has that material, and I do this like for any material you might want. So like I'll just select this and then go export selected. And instead of using an FBX, I'm going to use an OBJ file because it actually separates out the materials into a JPEG on my export. So I can grab that seamless texture and use it where I want to. So this is super powerful for any material in Rhino. You can just kind of steal and use in Blender. Don't tell McNeil, sorry. Let's go to, just call it parquet, OBJ, save. And then just hit OK. I don't even care about the detail. And you can see with the flat object, I can use fewer details because I don't need it. It warps it, and it doesn't warp it. OK. Now, to get this material, watch, I go to open, and I'll go to, where's my guitar folder? Right there. So it brought in that image, right? I can open it up, and it's now added the parquet floor. However, it is going to be all one piece. See it? So now I need to change the repetitions on it. Actually, let me do this. Let me go to, I just want to grab this. Go to, click on that, tab over for edit mode, hit A to grab everything. I want to do face select and just want to select that one face because I don't want parquet floor on all my walls. So I'm going to select that one face, and just like how we joined it earlier, we can separate it. Mesh, separate, selection. It's just P, I guess. Okay, P. Cool. So now this is going to be a separate piece. If I tab over, you've got cube 1, right? And that's just the floor, which has my material on it. All right, cool. So next we've got this. Let's go to our shading tab. This is where we edit our materials. You can already see that there's a lot more functionality and stuff that we can do with our materials and stuff. We have node-based materials here, which is super powerful. So let's go ahead and bring up our first plugin here. So go to File, and we're going to go Edit, Preferences, and we're going to go to Plugins, Add-ons here. Okay, and then I'm going to search for my add-on, and it's going to be called Node Wrangler. And it's turned on mine because I had it on before, but you just click that, and that's great. So basically what that means is if I pull out of here, it will give me this window that'll show me what I can do. And I'm going to do mapping vector. Click that. Okay. And then from vector, I'm going to pull out again, and I'm going to type texture coordinate, and I'm going to go UV texture coordinate. Boom. Okay. So next, we can change the scale. So I'm going to do 30, 30, 30. Not enough. 50. So it's going to be, again, kind of an art or a science. 60, 60, 60. No. And let's look at our reference image here. Because again, I'm trying to kind of replicate to show the differences between what you can do with each of them. All right, so the size is we got about 1, 2, 3 of them that go across there. So we got 1, 2, we probably need to double this. 400, 400, 400. $380. Okay, so that basically is, those are some very basic parameters right now for our nodes here. We'll get into other things. There's so many things that you can do with nodes. Emissive materials. You can add normal maps to it that give it a sense of texture. All that kind of stuff. We'll get into that more later. I'm going to bring down the roughness so I've got a nice sheen to the floor. Okay. And that looks good. So we've now added that. Let's go back to our modeling window and look at the kind of dramatic lighting we've got set up here, right? Okay, so this is a ray traced version. I might actually take this kind of softbox looking thing and mirror it over to get another one here. So I'm in edit mode, get out of edit mode, click, then I can click on this, and then I can hit D or Control D, no, Shift D to duplicate. And then move it along the y-axis, actually, y-axis, right? And then R on the X, okay? So I've now got 2 of those lights kind of shining on the object. And I can, while I have this selected, kind of change how bright they are right here. So with it selected, you get this little light tool thing here, right? And I can actually select them both at the same time. Just shift and add it to the selection and change the power of both of them. Make it really bright, so you can really control the area light. And then, of course, there are spotlights too, which have like more of a rounded kind of light like that. And they have more settings, like you've got your radius. You can kind of improve increase your radius, your bounces, and your power. So use the spotlight. No, I somehow. Okay. And you can see like this is like the cone of power. So yeah, if I click on that, spot size. All right. So those are different lights, and then of course the sunlight, and there's multiple different lighting kind of things you can play with there too. All right, so those are spotlights, and yeah, sometimes you got to be careful where you put them because you don't want to have like a giant sphere kind of right on your object, or even just changing the size of the spotlight itself to. Which one is reflecting? It's hard to tell. Where's my reflection? Oh yeah, you can make the radius of it really small, and that'll help too. Sometimes it's hard to select what you're working on, right? And that doesn't really affect the lighting. It'll just give you a smaller little circle there. Okay, cool. So that's some of the lighting stuff. Last thing I want to do is show how to use an environment similar to what we did in Rhino to kind of get some of the lighting from your a custom HDRI. So let's go ahead and delete this cube background. So I click on that and hit delete. And you can see we're just in kind of like a gray void back there. So I've got the ground plane that I set up earlier. I just got rid of the rest of the cube that I was using to kind of trap the light. Now I want to actually go ahead and bring in an HDRI, but I also want to select this and hit my decimal point to back out. And I'm going to change the scale of this. I don't need this thing so big. So I'm going to hit S and just kind of drag it in. Okay. Then I'm going to go to a top view. Click on my Z up here, go to wireframe so I can see where's my guitar. Is it still okay? And then G, X, or Y, and then scale it out a little bit more. Right about there, should be fine. Okay, let's go back to rendered view here. Let's see, I've also just destroyed my, let's go this way, GZ, right there. GZ a little bit down, there we go. And yeah, I've changed because I scaled it down, I've still got my shading here set so high. So if I change that to 150, that's a little better. Okay. Under my shading tab. All right, go back over to ray traced here. Still needs to be a little bit smaller. Okay. So let's add some light from an environment. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. We're going to be using an HDRI. Again, you can get stuff from Adobe stock, which I find to be kind of fun and play with to get like a little bit different lighting environment than what I'm going to be doing here. But I'm actually going to be using the lighting from another. What's also interesting is you can render in Blender a stereo panoramic HDRI from a different file and use that as a background to light objects. So I have my house that I've done and have it all in Blender. I did a stereo panorama of it, and I'm going to use my house as kind of the environment lighting for my object here. So let's go to the World tab where we set the worlds up. And I'm going to go ahead and click on where it says background, or I'm sorry, where it says color here, and then I'm going to go environment texture. Okay. We see our pink again, and then I'm going to open, and I'm going to go to a folder that I've got. This is my stereo panoramic HDRI, or just HDR, and I hit OK. So now in the background, you can see that's my house that I made in Blender. And so I'm getting some of the lighting in the background from the environment. So it makes it look a lot more real. Okay, so now I'm in shading here, and in object mode, I can go over here to modeling. Very cool. And put it back in ray traced. Switch out of edit mode. Okay. Now we're ready to put in the camera. Right now our scene is right here. We want to add a camera to it that we can set up parameters of the camera. So I'm going to hit Shift A again. And this is just like, oh, I'm picking up my DSLR, right? And I just added it to the scene. So I hit GZ to kind of bring it up. All right. And we want to stage our camera looking at our object. And then we can switch into the camera view. So toggle into the camera view. We can see this is the scene that we're going to render out. So next I want to go up to the view window here, and I want to go to cameras, and I want to go to frame camera bounds, and that'll give me a larger version of that. Great. Then I'm going to pull out this little tab here and go to view, and then I'm going to lock camera to view. Okay, so that means as I rotate around, my camera is actually staying with me. So that's a super important for staging kind of functionality there. And then I'll bring this back here, just kind of close that down. So it's not taking up my whole scene. All right. Now we can set up the camera. If I click on the camera bounds here, you get a little camera setting. And this is where I can adjust my lens length. I can, create more dynamic views. So I'm at 50 millimeters right now. I can make it more wide angle by going wider and then zooming back in. And you can see it really makes a dramatic kind of angle on the piece. I can also go to depth of field, set this up, similar to what we did before. And I can focus on an object, like right there, and then change the f-stop to bring the rest of it into focus more. Let me go back. I like it. A 50 millimeter, I think, is good for this. Okay, so that's the camera. Depth of field, super important. Lens, all of that kind of stuff is all kind of edited there. Then we can go up to our render tab here, making sure always in cycles, GPU compute. 4,000 samples is probably good. Remember, we did 1,500 samples, I believe, in Rhino, and it came out really nice. So I think 4,000 will be even better. Okay, so then we've got a resolution over here on this tab, and we want to set to something higher. 1920 by 1080, that's going to give you a 1080p resolution. It's fine for smaller things, websites, that kind of stuff. But I always like to pull up the screen resolution kind of parameters here so I can see 4K, ultra high definition, 3840 by 2160 is what I'm going to do. So 3850 by 2160. Okay, so that's going to be a nice ultra high resolution image. You saw also it changes the aspect ratio here too. So if I wanted this to be in portrait mode, say I'm doing something like that's sitting up straight instead of laying down flat, you'd probably want to use a portrait resolution. You just flip these. So you go 2160 by 3840. And then you've got a portrait resolution, right? So that's kind of how you can switch these around. Use a high resolution though, get a nice image. So yeah, that's setting up the parameters for rendering. And yeah, once everything is all just the way you want it, all you got to do is hit F12 or go up here and go render and render image. And that will bring up this dialog or this box here where it will ray trace and it'll tell you kind of how much time is remaining and how many samples are done. And it renders really pretty quick. And if your computer isn't rendering super quick, you can always lower the resolution or change the amount of tracing parameters it does. So, and again, where that's found is right here, right? So 4,000 just went really quick. I might bump my max samples. Basically, what the samples are is it's like how much it's thinking about the way the light's moving around the space. So I can do that. Or you can lower your resolution to something that's going to be just the right size for what you need it for. So just make sure that if you're printing it and it's 11 by 17, you've got good enough resolution to match that. But otherwise, it's up to you. So yeah, that's that. And then once you've got your render done, you can go to image, save as, and then save it to your file here. So this would be Blender guitar PNG. Save as image. All right, so we've got a good looking object, nice reflections happening from an HDRI scene. The next thing I want to talk about is, and probably the last thing for this video, to be honest with you, just to make sure it's, you know, one of my shorter ones. I'll get into baking materials and stuff in, I think, the next video. But this, I'm going to now add some atmospheric fog to it. So the particle systems inside of Blender are great. That's something that Rhino is not quite as good at. So let's go ahead and create a little bit of fog to the scene here. So I'm going to switch out of my camera so I don't mess up the angle of my camera. Yeah, if I moved it around, again, it's locked to the camera, so I don't want to do that. I want to now go Shift A to add a box mesh cube, and then I'm going to hit S, Y, and scale it that way, G, Y, move it that way, S, Z, kind of make it low, so it's like hovering over the ground, kind of. Okay. Next, I want to go over to the materials window and create a new material, and I'm going to call it fog. And then I want to remove the surface. And I want to go to volume, and I want to add principled volume. Okay. Then I'm going to increase the density, and you can see how it's kind of increasing the fog density there. And then anthropicity, or whatever the heck that word is, I'm going to kind of play with that too. Now let's switch back to our camera view and kind of manipulate it a little bit more. Okay. And that adds a bit of atmospherics, and you can really kind of play with the effect of it. So it makes it look more or less realistic. Cool. So the last thing I want to do is I want to kind of move this so that I don't want this little glare in here anymore. So I'm going to kind of rotate out a little bit, just like that. Perfect. And then I'm going to hit F12 and we'll get another render. And this render is going to take a bit longer because of the fog. So just be aware of that. That's one thing. When you're adding particles, it does increase the rendering time quite substantially. So once this is done, I'll show you how it looks. Okay, there it is. And so now I'm going to go image and save as, and I'm going to go ahead and title this 2 and save as image. Awesome. Let's look at them compare. Let's compare the two of them together. So, so there's the one from Blender, and there's the one from Rhino. Let's put them next to each other and talk a little bit about some of the things we see that differ, right? The Blender version with the HDRI in the background, there's definitely some subtle differences to the intensity of the color. It feels a little bit more natural, but very similar. So, you know, you can see that the new rendering systems in Rhino are a little bit easier to deal with, but there's so many things you can play with in Blender that really makes the software kind of fun to play and manipulate your objects in. And then also its ability to kind of prepare things for exporting and bringing into other programs are really awesome too. So that is it for this series on the guitar. I will be using this model, of course, in future tutorials, just showing some more tools, probably mostly in Blender, for baking textures and that kind of stuff that is a little bit more advanced, especially as you start to prepare stuff as video game assets. So, for example, what does that mean? If I wanted to make all of these objects one object and all of the materials UV maps, whether it's the metalness UV map plus the image UV map plus the shininess UV map, all of those can be mapped and then brought into other software so that this is a one game asset with a package of materials that are all UV mapped onto one object. So I'm going to be doing that as a tutorial. I'm also going to be in that video talking about how to clean up your model so that it isn't taking up so much space, and also how to batch export all of these parts as separate FBXs so that you've got separate FBXs, separate materials, all of it ready to kind of move around as you're still working on your project. So that'll be in the next video series, but hopefully you found this informative and kind of can see the differences between the software suites and how they treat models, and yeah, and can continue to play. So thank you very much. See you next time.